At the cusp of morning twilight, while the Saturn rise loomed large and magnificent with its pale emerald and indigo auroras cast across the eastern sea. In that hour of serene quiet, when only the birds and nocturnal creatures were stirring and the races of men still slumbered, only the wise ones then roused themselves by the light of the moons and the faraway sun, that beloved golden star of the night. Those who knew the celestial lights, who counted the days and hours, and kept the sacred fires kindled for sacrificial rites, they alone attended diligently to their arts, though perhaps the eyes of the hunters did also shine in those dim hours before dawn's triumphal ride over the horizon, in her pale, silvery white chariot with emerald and lapis streamers given her by the day god, whom all men of the world then knew as Kronos. Of those wise ones, the most exalted did gather in their congregations atop the hills, and the more hospitable of the mountains. The wisest of the wise, most venerated among their peers, were ensconced in the holy cloister at the North Pole, whereupon they could behold the whole heavenly purview of moons, stars, and comets. The priestesses shuffled through the marble halls of the observatory, with their white and blue robes fluttering about them, and their thin, transparent veils wafting gently about their faces. A young girl, just newly a woman, stepped upon the platform of the cosmic dials that were arrayed under a clear glass dome. The girl was thin and lithe, pale-skinned with wavy blonde hair and citrine-colored eyes. The brightness of youth and enthusiasm was gleaming from her rosy cheeks and sun-kissed face. She gazed around the platform from one figure to another, looking for someone. An older woman was there also, lecturing the younger ladies. She was dark-skinned, with long mats of black hair that fell over her womanly body. Her eyes were the color of red beer and full of intelligence and intensity. The lantern light from the columns of the chamber was glittering upon the woman's high-cheeked and narrow-chinned face. She saw the young girl ambling about and dismissed the others so that she could focus her attention on this newcomer. She walked with long strides and a formidable gait across the marble tiles. Her shoes clicked, and she gracefully wove between the bronze dials until she stood towering over the little woman. "You must be Arnobretta, the girl from Friesland by Sky," the tall, dark lady said, with a deep and syrupy voice. The girl was startled and gave a quick nod, but did not utter a word. The older woman was more than a bit intimidating with her big stature and directness, and her projected confidence. "You can speak, I hope. No one told me to expect a mute." "Yes, mistress." "Are you Lady Dathares, then?" the girl asked clumsily. "Indeed, I am. Pamuse Dathares, Archmatron of the Order of Dion. I've been given charge of you while you reside here at the Icemoor Temple. That's what the locals call this place, but it has been the North Pole Observatory for centuries now. You may refer to me as Matron or Lady Dathares if you wish. So, have you been settled in your quarters already?" the dark woman asked dutifully. "I have, yes," Arnobretta replied. "Well then, you shall come with me, and I'll show you the temple, and explain where you may go at your own leisure, and where you must not go unescorted. It will be daytime soon, so you won't need a lantern. Be sure that you pay careful attention. The other matrons have little in the way of patience or leniency," she said. Pamuse had a commanding voice and austere countenance, and the girl gave no resistance to her, out of fear. The two of them went down the steps from the observatory and through the outer halls of the cloister. The pale Saturnian light was coming over the horizon and warming the windows and the walls of the temple. They took some turns and went into the inner cloister, where skylights and lanterns lit their way. A wide archway stood at the end of the corridor before them, and they entered a 3-storied chamber with shelves of books and scroll cases reaching from the floor to the ceiling, and spiral stairs and balconies girdling the walls. "This is the library. Can you read?" Pamuse asked. "A little bit," Annabretta answered sheepishly. "You'll be required to read a lot while you're tutored here. I suppose I shall have to teach you. This is the largest known archive in the world, and the matrons are quite proud of it. Perhaps they should be. It's one of the best remaining testaments to the power and knowledge we used to hold. If you study here, you'll be expected to treat these tomes and scrolls with the utmost care and gentleness. You won't be allowed to bring any drinks or candles or anything that poses a danger to these pages. Most of the world nowadays cannot even make paper, so have some respect for it." The matron instructed her charge. Annabretta nodded absently, for her eyes were pulled across the library in a wonder-struck gaze. "You said that you're from the Order of Dione?" the girl asked her matron. "Yes, I headed the order for 5 years. That was just before I was called here," Pamuse confirmed. "Then you come from the South Pole, at the borderlands beyond Nithon," Annabretta concluded. Pamuse looked upon her with a mix of disdain and astonishment. "It seems you know something about the world, after all." "How did you suppose that?" Pamuse questioned her. "Well, you look like a Nithonian, but also I've been told that it's impossible to view Dione from any place other than the South Pole, or at least the very southern reaches of the world," Annabretta replied. "That's correct. The moon of Dione can only be seen from beyond the borderlands. As for the Nithonians, I may have been born among them and share their likeness, but I am not one of them. Not any more than you are a Scythian or Thyazian, just because you might look a bit like them on the outside. You are of the 6th race. You are Caesarian, and let no other notions color your mind." Pamuse counseled her charge, with an overt forcefulness intoned in her words. Annabretta submitted with a firm nod. This was not the first time that a matron had urged her to forget about the land of her birth, and she knew it would not be the last time. The matron led her on through the library, and the thick atmosphere of paper smells and the dull, earthy colors of old tome bindings. When they passed the archway on the opposite side of the chamber, they traversed one more sky-lit corridor and reached a watchtower. They ascended the spiraling steps to the top of the tower, and Pamuse opened a heavy wooden door with an iron ring for a latch. As they went out into the cold polar air, Annabretta pulled the hood of her robes over her head and held her arms crossed over her breasts. "Don't fret. We won't be out here for long. It's easier for me to show you the temple grounds this way," Pamuse explained. "Is it cold like this all year round?" Annabretta asked. "There's a few months of warmth. The air is a bit warmer, and the snows will usually stop around the middle of Aptia, after the Scythians perform the summoning, and the Vinatreia birds bring the warm winds northward with them. The air currents melt the snow, and the rivers will flow freely, but of course it will still get cold at dusk and dawn, and the ice mountains will never melt. They haven't for thousands of years now. You surely knew that, since you lived in Skard for most of your life. The snows should mostly melt off the ground in late Aptia or early Conia, but they'll be back by Lothus, so the warm season is only 4 months long here, the matron said. Yes, I remember the summoning rituals in Vernes and in Auverness on the opposite ends of the hot season. Those were my favorite months. I was always delighted to see the blossoms opening up in Vernes, and I loved going for long strolls through the forest in Auvergne to see the colorful leaves and shoots and breathe the cool, misty air before the snows come in. It gets cold in Scarth, but it's not so harsh in the southern grasslands. I guess it never gets cold in Nithon, does it? The girl asked. Pamuse shrugged and shook her head. Not so much, not unless you go close to the South Pole, and there only during the eclipse months, when the sun is no longer visible at night. Anyway, look down there to the southern wall, and you'll see the steel-barred gates you came through when you arrived here. There is a small trading post that you passed when you entered, and beyond there is only wilderness for hundreds of miles. Do not stray far outside these walls. There are roving packs of huge crocs and Daedons that will devour absolutely anything that they can manage to run down, and their sense of smell is keen. There are not so many of them this far north, but there are plenty of Omoen and Sivats that are just as deadly. I've heard it said that Skye is overall one of the safest countries in the north, so you need to be mindful while you live here. There are plenty of dangers in these hinterlands. Furthermore, if you were to survive long enough to be found by any of the natives, you may be lost to us, Pamuse forewarned. Anabretta could not help but grin with dismissal of the suggestion. Pamuse shot her a stern glare. Aren't they all Scathians who live this far north? Why should I be afraid of them? The girl asked defensively. Indeed, a few barbarous tribes of Scathians are the only inhabitants of this inhospitable country. They are isolated and totally unfamiliar with any outside customs or conventions. It is unlikely that they would harm you, but equally unlikely that they will let you leave once they have caught you unescorted in their lands. You would probably be traded in exchange for some shiny seashells or thick, warm animal hides, and then promptly wed and bred. Then I'll be waiting 13 years to train your daughter, if she isn't subjected to the same treatment, Pamuse said, with an expression of disdain for the prospect. Anabretta simply nodded